Welcome to All Things Social Security. Enjoy your video. Hey, so I wanted to respond to your question about how you fill out those various intake forms when it comes to variable questions about when you became disabled, when were you unable to work any further, when did you stop working? They all sound somewhat the same. They're not the same. And that's why I think the SSA asks for that information in different ways, which is why we do too. So it helps us try to see where it's like a Rubik's Cube. Where will all these things fit for a valid alleged onset date? Okay, so the first thing we have that we look at is your Social Security earnings statement, because this is the official record, really, of when you last worked SGA for a sustained period. And in your case, that would be 2022, as you earned almost $30,000. It wasn't until 2023 that your annual income jumped down to far below SGA. Same for 2024. Don't know what it is for 2025. I don't recall off the top of my head if you're still dabbling. Now, another thing to this is you are a 1099 self-employed person. I should say self-employed person with 1099. Sometimes when we're self-employed, sometimes we have 1099, plus some people just send us a check, depending on what kind of services you're providing, because you provide services to companies, businesses. They will issue a 1099 for what they pay you because they're going to want to write that off as a business expense. Unlike if you did something for a person that wasn't for a business, they weren't a business. Okay, so we've got the last earnings showing, say, 30,000 in 2022. So this means that certainly not before 2022 can we come up with an alleged onset date. And this also means before 2022, we can't claim that you were working under SGA, even though you did have some under SGAs, but the 2022 year of SGA is going to be a break in what would be a full-blown 5-year disability period thus far. So we really can't assert anything we now know until 2022 or after. And the reason why I say 2022, possibly, if that $30,000 was earned before June, we could feasibly, assuming that's when you were feeling so bad, things were starting to go even more awry, we could assert June of 2022. If you work till the end of the year, substantially, and you have that income, we wouldn't be able to do that. Normally, people don't necessarily become more severe or drop under SGA by the month in December necessarily. Usually it is somewhere earlier in the year, just because December is only 1 month out of the whole year. So usually it's very variable. So that is why 2022 was the answer to a particular question that you had asked. I think you had said something about, and I should probably look. Hold on. Give me a minute. I'm looking at your messages. You said, on my past paperwork, the date I became disabled is 12/1/2022. Okay, so you're saying that it was around November that things went very south. So 12/1, by 12/1, you were no longer working, say, over 15 hours a week, or, you would drop down. Okay. And that the 29,000 was largely earned before that. So we look at that one document. Then we also have your packet 3, if you recall, included where you provided us details on your work history. It was there that you said self-employed person in the field that you're in through 10 of 2024. And that is because, remember, you stopped working substantially in 2022, but you still brought in a little bit of income. It's under SGA. It doesn't mean you're not disabled during those years, but you finally stopped, it appears, you're saying, in October of 2024. So that's just saying when you stopped work altogether. Whether we would, and this'll come up presumably shortly when we're doing some more online data when we have to figure out when did she stop working? Well, do they mean, and it's a double-edged sword. Do they mean when did she stop working SGA, the kind of work that counts, or when did she stop working at anything? I like to go with the SGA. And as you remember, we did that 820 in a forethought that when we say we stopped working in 2022 because you stopped working substantially in 2022, and they see that you have income after that, part-time and small, they're going to want that 820. So we, you know how we get things in advance. This is why. All right. So we have that information. So we know now you stopped working substantially in 2022. So we think that's going to be our onset date. But we have to be, clear to them, that you're still working part-time, because you have to always be very candid. And then in the actual application, and for you, this is packet 4, you referred to question 5A. When did you become, this is the packet you're working on, right? When did you become unavailable to work because of illness, injuries, or conditions? You can probably say anything you want there. I mean, that's accurate. Unable. I would say that would be the 12/1 of 2022. And I say that because, hold on, I just got a 12/1 of 2022, because you became unable to work substantially. Now, they don't tell you whether they mean substantially or unsubstantially. So we use substantially, and then we do the 820. You follow? Because if we say you were working with no qualifications to October of 2024, they're going to have your alleged onset date at October of 2024, and you will have no chance of getting any benefits, any finding of disabled before then. Now, it's not like you're going to get paid benefits for the time period before whatever the retroactivity is, since you're just filing now. Other things can stem from that. For instance, if they find you disabled in 2022 when it seems you really were, then that would be your established onset date. They don't pay you all the time, but that shuts off the valve of 0 years or low income $5,000 years being put into your calculation for what your benefit's going to be. So those drag down years of the last 2-3 years, they won't be counted in the calculation that averages your income. They would bring it down because you made more in prior years. You following me? Okay. And you also asked about 12. Let me get to 12. And for anybody who's ends up watching a vagary of this later, since I'm trying to keep it very generic with no names, right? When I'm talking about question 5 and question 12, I am referring to what would be if you were filling out a paper Title II SSD application, some of the questions on it. I use that as my base to get my intake with my clients. We actually file the application online, so we don't use the paper version from which we derive these questions. Although there are some exceptions, which would be when the SSA online access is down, or they somehow it won't take it. It will not accept her or his application. There's some misconnect. We'll do it on paper, and because we want to get it in, and that's when we fax it in, and then they do the printout and they make them sign and confirm that they wanted to apply and all that business. Okay, so question 12 is where the SSA asks, please list all employers with addresses from this calendar year and last year. If more than 2, then please include the third in the remark. And there's some tiny little spaces to include any employer who had this calendar year. And right now we're in 2026, so this makes it easy for most people. And that would be 2025. Now, if you're self-employed, you don't have an employer. So that would be nobody. And that would be you because you're self-employed. Okay. Instead, it's going to be later on, they ask you in question 14B, I don't know if you've gotten to it, were you self-employed this year or last year? My throat is drying up. Too much talking. Okay. So I hope that answers that question. Let's see if we have another one. Okay. The big question was, I guess I'm still not understanding why I'm putting 12/1 of 2022 as my disability start date but that I worked until 10 of 24. I'll just repeat it again. The further back you can go, where you were dealing with severe impairments that curbed your ability to put in all those hours you had been putting, so everything's cut down, and it resulted in the forevermore real reduction in your work, even if you're still working a little part-time, but it's under SGA, you can use that date. You were disabled then from working full-time and substantially back in 2022, right? Now, let's say you're a person who, no, I stopped working so much because I wanted to go on vacations and eat bonbons in front of the TV, and I didn't have any impairments that were disabling at that time. That would be different, but I don't think that was the substance of our conversation, right? I think as per conversation, or we wouldn't have put this, you were having serious problems the last few years. It didn't just happen 12 months ago. So that is why we will ultimately, unless you give me information to the contrary, be filing for you with a 12/1/2022 onset date. And this is, I tell people about this all the time. You really have to go through, this is why we have all this paperwork. So I see all the cross references that SSA would be getting you months apart if you were pro se, and it will have blown it. You probably would be dealing with a 2024 alleged onset date, and they're not going to give you a 2022 then. Now, when we allege it 12/1/2022, because it's a reasonable place to start and see if you had enough evidence, it's a possibility that you could get it. So, all right. I hope that answered it. I'm going to turn this off. If I come to another question, I will also do it on video, only because the thought of talking right now will drive me crazy. And if somebody else can get used to this kind of general information, I want to share it to them. All right. I will talk to you soon, and I will see you on the portal and maybe at live stream.